Stop your baby right now. People paid for peace, not your noise. The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin like a knife. Her words echoed off the metal walls, freezing every sound, every breath. A young black mother, Aisha Thompson, sat in the middle seat of row 28B, her baby Noah clutched tightly in her trembling arms. Her eyes were wide, half in shock, half in shame. The baby's cries, once soft and pleading, had turned desperate, the kind that tore through the heart of any parent who's tried everything and failed. Around her, passengers exchanged looks, irritated sighs, muttered complaints, shaking heads. One woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "Why do people even travel with infants?" Another man pulled his earbuds tighter and muttered, "Unbelievable." Aisha's hands shook as she rocked Noah gently, whispering through tears, "It's okay, baby. Please, please stop." Her voice broke. "Mama's here." But the flight attendant, Ms. Renee Parker, sharp uniform, sharper tongue, wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her polished smile gone, her voice rising enough for the whole section to hear. "Ma'am, you need to get control of your... Baby, right now you're disturbing everyone." I'm trying," Aisha stammered. "He's just scared. It's his first flight." The attendant crossed her arms. "Then maybe you should have waited until he could handle it. People didn't pay for chaos, ma'am. They paid for quiet." The entire cabin went silent, except for Noah's cries. Aisha's cheeks burned with humiliation. She turned away, pressing her face into her baby's blanket. A tear fell onto Noah's cheek. She didn't even bother to wipe it away. At the front of the plane, a man quietly looked up from his seat in first class. Ethan Cole, mid-30s, clean-cut but casual, had been reading a business magazine. But now his focus was broken, his eyes narrowed as he watched the scene unfold. A young mother, exhausted and alone, being shamed in front of dozens of strangers. He couldn't hear every word, but he could feel the tone, the hostility, the imbalance. He watched Aisha's shoulders tremble as she whispered apologies that no one cared to hear. The attendant turned, heels clicking sharply against the floor, muttering to another steward, "I swear, some people just don't belong on flights like this." That sentence hit Ethan like a punch. He took a slow breath, eyes still fixed on Aisha. Back in economy, the tension lingered like smoke. Aisha held her baby close, rocking him gently until his cries softened to whimpers. Her chest ached. She felt the weight of 100 unseen eyes, judging her. Eyes that saw inconvenience, not motherhood. Her mind drifted for a moment. To the tiny apartment she'd left behind, the half-packed diaper bag, the missed shifts at the diner. This trip wasn't for leisure. It was for her mother's funeral in Los Angeles. She'd promised herself she would say goodbye, even if it meant facing the world alone. But now, on this plane full of strangers, she wished she'd never boarded. She tried to press the call button, desperate for some water, a bit of kindness, but the same attendant walked past her without even glancing down. Aisha's lips trembled. She turned toward the window, watching clouds drift like ghosts across the sky. Noah finally fell asleep, his tiny hand clutching her necklace, the one her mother had given her. From first class, Ethan kept watching. His jaw tightened. Something inside him stirred. A memory, maybe? Or just that small, aching sense of injustice that good people can't ignore. As the plane hummed softly through the sky, every passenger tried to move on. But Ethan couldn't, because sometimes one cruel sentence can expose everything wrong in a room full of silence. The cabin settled into uneasy silence, but Aisha could still feel every stare burning against her back. Even with Noah asleep in her arms, the shame lingered, like a stain she couldn't wash off. She closed her eyes for a moment, pretending to rest, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying those cruel words. Stop your baby right now. People paid for peace. Her chest tightened. She had heard those words before, not on a plane, but in life, in grocery stores, at the bus stop, even in her own neighborhood. Words that told her she didn't belong where others thought she shouldn't be. The flight attendant, Renee Parker, walked past again with her tray of drinks. She didn't even glance in Aisha's direction, though Aisha's call light blinked, weakly above her. Instead, Renee stopped 3 rows ahead, laughing softly with a couple ordering wine, her tone sweet and polished again. Like nothing had happened. Aisha looked down at Noah's tiny face, now peaceful and soft. She brushed a tear from her cheek and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's strong. We'll be okay." But even she didn't believe her own words. Outside the window, clouds rolled endlessly below, white and quiet, the complete opposite of how Aisha felt inside. Her world had been noise for years. The sound of alarm clocks for double shifts, the buzz of cleaning machines at the hotel where she worked nights, the tired laughter of co-workers who had stopped dreaming long ago. This flight wasn't supposed to be like that. It was supposed to be her moment to say goodbye to her mother. The woman who'd worked her whole life but never got to rest. The woman who had always said, "No matter what they say, you walk with your head high, Aisha." But right now, Aisha's head was bowed low. Across the cabin, Ethan Cole hadn't looked away once. He watched Renee glide through the aisles with the same smile she'd worn when she scolded Aisha. It wasn't professionalism. It was performance. He pressed the small call button above his seat. Within seconds, Renee appeared at his side. Posture perfect, smile practiced. "Yes, sir? How may I help you?" Ethan spoke softly, politely. "That woman back there, the one with the baby, everything all right?" Renee's expression froze for a split second before her mask slipped back on. "Oh, her? She's fine. Some passengers just don't know how to manage their kids. Nothing to worry about." Ethan studied her, his calm eyes piercing through. Her rehearsed charm. "I see," he said slowly. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, his gaze followed her down the aisle. He leaned back in his seat, jaw tight. There was something about the way she said "those passengers" that made his skin crawl. Meanwhile, Aisha sat in silence, unaware that someone had noticed, someone who wouldn't let this moment be forgotten. Somewhere between New York and Los Angeles, 2 stories, one of pain, one of conscience, were quietly moving toward collision. The airplane rattled suddenly as turbulence struck, jolting everyone upright. Trays clattered, glasses spilled, and a few gasps filled the cabin. The seatbelt light flicked on, and the captain's voice echoed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and fasten your belts. We'll be passing through some mild turbulence." The plane dipped again. Aisha instinctively tightened her hold on Noah. The baby stirred, whimpered, and then started to cry. Loud, scared, uncontrollable. Heads turned. Again, Aisha's heart sank. "No, no, please, baby, it's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. She tried humming softly, rocking him the way her mother used to when storms came. But the louder the wind outside, the louder Noah cried inside. And then, the familiar clicking of heels. Renee Parker was coming. Aisha didn't even look up this time. She already knew what was coming. The tone, the glare, the public shame. Renee stopped beside her seat, arms folded tightly. Her patience had run out. "Ma'am," she snapped, her voice cutting through the cabin, "I'm going to need you to quiet your baby immediately." Aisha's eyes filled again. "I'm trying," she whispered. "No, you're not," Renee barked. "This is a public flight, not your living room. You're disturbing everyone again." A man 2 rows ahead muttered, "She's right," loud enough for Aisha to hear. Tears streamed down her cheeks now. "Please." He's scared. Aisha said softly, almost begging. I can't help it. Renee scoffed. You can't help it? You're making everyone uncomfortable. If you can't handle your baby, maybe you shouldn't be flying. Her words landed like bullets. Sharp. Cruel. Final. The cabin froze. The only sound was Noah's desperate crying. Then suddenly, a male voice from the front broke the silence. Calm. Deep. Firm. That's enough. Everyone turned. Ethan Cole stood in the aisle, tall, composed, with a quiet fire in his eyes. He had unbuckled his seatbelt and walked out from first class, ignoring the startled looks of the attendants in the front cabin. He made his way slowly down the aisle, the hum of the engines filling the silence. Every passenger watched. Phones. Half lifted, breaths held. He stopped right beside Aisha. She looked up, startled, not recognizing him, just seeing a stranger standing between her and humiliation. Ethan looked at Renee. His tone was calm but cold enough to slice through her. Composure. Ma'am, I think you're the one making everyone uncomfortable. Renee blinked, stunned. Excuse me? You heard me, Ethan said evenly. You don't yell at a mother for doing her best. You don't embarrass her in front of a plane full of strangers. You help her. That's your job. The tension was electric. Renee's mouth opened, but no words came out. Passengers turned to each other, whispering. A few nodded quietly. Sir, this doesn't concern you, she finally managed. It does, Ethan replied, because I'm one of the passengers who paid for peace, and right now, you're the only disturbance here. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Ethan knelt beside Aisha's seat, his voice softening. Ma'am, you're doing amazing. You don't need to apologize for being a mother. Aisha blinked in disbelief. No one had ever stood up for her before. Not like this. Her lips quivered as she whispered, Thank you. Renee's voice rose again, defensive now. Sir, please return to your seat. You're disrupting the flight. Ethan reached into his pocket and held up his first-class boarding pass. Then maybe I should take my business elsewhere next time. Because if this is how this airline treats people, I'll make sure others know it too. That hit her hard. The whispers grew louder. A man across the aisle clapped once, then stopped awkwardly when no one joined. But it didn't matter. The moment had already shifted. The power in the room was no longer hers. Aisha sat still, her baby's cries now soft sobs against her chest. Ethan gently took a tissue from his pocket and handed it to her. It's all right, he said softly. You're safe now. Renee's face burned red. She looked around, no backup, no sympathy, just rows of eyes silently judging her instead. For the first time, she felt what Aisha had felt all along, and as Ethan stood tall beside the young mother, the cabin fell completely silent. Not from fear, but from respect, because sometimes justice doesn't come with noise. It comes with one person brave enough to stand. The cabin was silent. Every passenger stared, not at the crying baby now asleep in his mother's arms, but at the woman who had just been stripped of her arrogance mid-air. Renee Parker stood frozen, her hands clutching her service tray like a shield. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. The confident, polished flight attendant who once ruled the aisle now looked small, cornered by truth. Ethan's steady voice broke the silence again. I think the captain should know how one of his crew treats passengers. Renee blinked, horrified. Sir, that's not necessary. I think it is. Ethan cut her off, calm but firm. You didn't just embarrass this woman, you embarrassed what your uniform stands for. The weight of his words made a few passengers nod quietly. One woman in the front row murmured, He's right. Renee glanced toward the front, panic flickering in her eyes. Moments later, another attendant hurried down the aisle, then returned with the co-pilot, a middle-aged man with a calm but stern face. He crouched slightly to speak softly, yet clearly enough for those nearby to hear. "Sir, what seems to be the issue?" Ethan gestured toward Aisha, who sat clutching Noah, protectively. This mother was publicly humiliated for her baby crying. She was yelled at, mocked, and ignored when she asked for help. I don't think that's how your airline defines professionalism. The co-pilot's gaze moved from Ethan to Aisha, and finally to Renee, who stood pale and stiff. Her lips parted as if to defend herself, but the co-pilot raised a hand. "Miss Parker," he said quietly but firmly. "Is this true?" Renee swallowed. "I may have raised my voice, but nothing," he interrupted. "We don't raise our voices at passengers, especially not at a mother struggling to calm her child." His voice softened as he turned to Aisha. "Ma'am, I'm deeply sorry for what happened. You didn't deserve that." Aisha's lips quivered. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching Noah tighter. Then the co-pilot looked back at Renee. "Apologize. Properly." Renee hesitated, eyes darting around, but the silence around her left no room to escape. She finally faced Aisha, her voice small, barely a whisper. I'm sorry, ma'am." Ethan's gaze didn't soften. "Louder," he said simply. Renee flinched, but obeyed. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. It was wrong." Aisha nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes, not from pain this time, but relief. The co-pilot thanked Ethan quietly and left, promising to address this properly after landing. Ethan turned back to Aisha. "Would you like to sit up front?" he asked gently. "Take my seat. There's more room, and your baby can rest comfortably." Aisha stared at him, stunned. "No, I can't take your seat," he smiled softly. "You can, because it's what I want to give. For the first time since takeoff," Aisha smiled. A small, trembling smile that carried the weight of every unshed tear. As Ethan helped her move to first class, the passengers watched in silence. Some guilty, some humbled, all changed. Because at 30,000 feet above the clouds, something higher than the plane had just taken flight. Humanity. The plane touched down softly on the runway at Los Angeles International Airport. The engines roared, the seatbelt light blinked, and passengers exhaled in relief. But this flight had carried more than luggage. It had carried a story no one, on board, would ever forget. Aisha sat in the first-class seat that Ethan had given up for her. Noah slept peacefully on her lap, his tiny fingers wrapped around the same silver necklace her mother had gifted her years ago. For the first time in hours, she felt safe, not judged, not watched, just seen. As the passengers began unbuckling, Ethan walked down from economy with a small, knowing smile. Aisha looked up, her eyes still red but filled with quiet gratitude. "I don't even know your name," she said softly. "Ethan," he replied simply, extending his hand. "Just Ethan." Aisha shook it gently. "Thank you for standing up when no one else did." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes it just takes one person to remind the rest what humanity looks like." Her eyes shimmered. "You didn't have to." "I did," he interrupted kindly, "because someone once stood up for my mother, too. I was 5 when she was yelled at for being too loud in a restaurant. I still remember the man who told her, 'You don't owe anyone silence.' That memory never left me." Aisha pressed a hand to her heart, holding back tears. "Maybe Noah will remember this moment too," she whispered. "Then I guess it was worth it," Ethan said softly. As the cabin doors opened, passengers began to exit, quieter, more thoughtful than they'd boarded. A few gave Aisha gentle smiles as they passed. Even the co-pilot paused to nod at her, respectfully. Renee Parker stood by the door, uniform neat, eyes downcast. When Aisha reached her, she hesitated, then offered a quiet, genuine, "Thank you for apologizing." Renee looked up, her expression humbled. "I'm truly sorry," she whispered again. Aisha nodded once and walked on. No bitterness, only peace. Outside, the cool LA air hit her face like a blessing. She inhaled deeply, whispering, "We made it, Mama." The sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling across the tarmac. Noah stirred, cooing softly in her arms, as if answering her prayer. Ethan stood a few feet away, pulling his bag from the belt. He looked over and smiled one last time. Aisha returned it, the kind of smile that says, "Thank you," without words. Then they went their separate ways, strangers connected forever by a moment of courage at 30,000 feet. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It shows up quietly in the courage of one person who decides to care. The world won't always need heroes in uniforms or suits. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to stay silent when kindness is missing. And if you ever find yourself in a moment like this, don't turn away. Because the smallest act of humanity can heal someone's world. If this story touched your heart, hit that button, share it with someone who still believes in kindness, and subscribe for more powerful stories that restore faith in humanity. Because compassion, not silence, changes the world.